Great. Well, welcome everyone. We have a really exciting panel session ahead of us. In this panel, we'll be exploring the critical connection between product development and revenue goals. We're looking to uncover how product leaders, like our panelist Frank, are effectively collaborating with their sales and revenue leaders, like our panelists Natalie and Neil, to ensure that product roadmaps align with sales objectives. So this discussion is going to highlight how a seamless partnership between these functions can drive growth, ensure market fit, deliver value to customers by designing product offerings that meet ever-evolving market demands. We have a really great group with us today, true masters of the art of modern sales. So I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves. Please give us your name, title, company, and where you're speaking from today. And I'll start with you, Frank.
Awesome. Well, great to be here today and super excited to talk about this with all of you. I'm Frank Dale. I'm the EVP of product here at SalesLoft. I'm actually here from Indianapolis today, and I have been on both sides of this conversation. I started my career in sales before moving into product, so very excited for today's talk.
Great, and I'll hand it to you, Natalie.
Great, thank you. My name is Natalie Cariola. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer with SmartRent. I'm here in our corporate office in Scottsdale, Arizona. Very excited about this conversation. I think many of my conversations are about how to bridge product, sales, CS, and overall revenue. So I think this is quite timely.
Excellent, and Neil.
Thanks, Meg. Hello, everyone. I'm Neil. I'm co-founder and CEO of Novatic. At Novatic, we help teams create interactive product demos. I'm personally, and generally, like the panel, I think is something that I'm excited about. As we spent a lot of time iterating on this topic, I feel like something that so many teams have worked on, never quickly, got it right. So excited to see what we can share today.
Awesome. And I'm Meg Getch. I'm the VP of Go-to-Market Operations and Strategy at Forder. Forder is the leader in identity intelligence for digital commerce, and I am calling in from New York City as well. So thank you, everyone, for those introductions. Really excited to get this panel started. So I was thinking about what's the right way to start this conversation. And, I think about the foundation of ensuring our product development is aligned with revenue goals is in the relationships that our product and go-to-market teams have with each other. So Frank, I wanted to start with you with some of the best practices that you've seen for fostering a collaborative environment where product, sales, and marketing teams work together to achieve shared revenue goals.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So I think the thing to know when you go to talk to anyone in product is this. Their job is to align the needs of the customer with the needs of the company. I say that because sometimes you'll run into product people, they think all about customer needs, but they're not always thinking about what the business needs also. So when we look at things that we build, you would imagine almost a Venn diagram. There has to be an overlap between the customer need set and how that helps the business at the same time. Are we going to help the business grow? Or are we going to help them retain net new customers? So when you go and you want to partner with a product person, the key things to always keep in mind are, how does this help the customer and how does it help the business? And is the thing I'm asking for something that lots of other customers will want? Because ideally, when you're developing software and you're developing a product, you're trying to build something that can be used across a core set of customer use cases. So it's going to need to be fairly use case specific versus highly customer specific. So if you can articulate those things, you'll automatically be in a much more productive conversation. The other thing that I would add, and then I'd love to hear from my revenue partners here, is if you can anchor less on the ask and more on what they're trying to achieve. Because often what you'll find is when you speak to a customer, and as a seller, you should probably intuitively know this, the way that they might articulate pain in the beginning will be at one level, but the actual reason that they want you to address it is down here. And this is the problem that we want to solve. And it's the same thing in a sales conversation. It's the place where I think product and sales conversations overlap the most. It is really about what is it you're trying to achieve. And if the product person understands what they're trying to achieve, they can typically help you with a better solution, and a solution that will apply to lots of your customers which means it's way more likely to get on the roadmap than if you come with a highly surface level feature request. But would love to hear from my partners here on the panel in revenue.
Yeah, Natalie, anything that you have to add from the revenue side?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think for me, when it comes to alignment, and this sounds obvious, but I feel like in practice, it probably doesn't happen often enough, which is around communication. And I think, Frank, you make such a good point that, I've been fortunate enough to always work with product teams that are really thinking through the lens of how do we serve the customer and make sure that we're serving the company needs. I think one of the big areas where I see it break down is in the communication through marketing and then through sales, right? So it's kind of the idea of tree falls in a wood, so anyone hear it, and it's the same with product. And so often, and I'm sure this sounds familiar to you, it'll sound familiar to listeners, is product builds something and it either pushes out and release notes via Slack, or maybe you have a marketing department that puts together comms and a Slack or an email goes out to the sales team. And then suddenly there's discourse internally, which is around, well, we built the stuff that we were supposed to build, and yet sales isn't talking about it and customers aren't buying it, and we don't understand what the problem is. And so I think that there is a big breakdown often in how things get communicated to a sales and CS org. And I think that so many organizations don't think of their sales and CS teams as internal customers the way they think about external customers. And how do we ensure that we're properly rolling things out to the sales and CS teams so that they in turn properly take it to the street when they talk to customers?
Totally, great point. Interested, Neil, from your perspective, kind of that CEO lens, like any comments to add there?
Yeah. Well, I think what Natalie and Frank both highlighted is that there's oftentimes a disconnect that needs to be bridged. And I really think it's the job of a company leader to put in place the structures where this feedback and that connection is almost there by default. It's not something that happens for the best folks. And so at Novatic, just to get super tactical, the way we've tried to bridge that today is we have a Slack channel. We use a tool called Syncly. And if we hear customer feedback, they literally paste the ask in that Slack channel. It's account Acme. It's is there a way to see the highest performing demos? And that has cross-team departmental visibility. So anyone can see those feature requests that are coming in. They can see trends, all of that. And so I think that's helpful to get these specific asks. But as Frank mentioned, there's a difference between the ask and the outcome. But I think what's also really helpful for teams to do is to have those skip level meetings with people that are in the field. Talk to your customer success team. And what I love doing is asking them, what are the biggest areas of friction that you encounter in the customer journey? What do customers struggle with the most? On the sales side, what features are coming up in competitive evals? What features would unlock the most revenue? And we just really get the perspective of people that are talking with people on the market side, as well as the customer side every day, and just see if that can help inform and bubble up some of these top features.
That's great. Yeah, I'm just interested, if anyone else on the panel has interesting tools or technology tricks they've had to help build that communication alignment.
Yeah,
I mean, I can
go ahead, Nana. Okay.
Frank, go ahead.
Would love to hear from Natalie. I think there are numerous ways to do it. One of the big things that you want to do as a product person is you want to partner with your revenue team ahead of time on the roadmap to make sure that you're aligned before you do things. So, we're in the middle of annual planning. We mark our roadmap to market every quarter, but we don't enter a year without making sure that we're aligned with our revenue team, our marketing team, our success, and our support teams. One of the things that we will also try to do is we'll try to get delegates from those teams and give them an opportunity to do things like review product requirements docs. You don't want the entire company in there because that would be a little bit of overkill, but just getting feedback from the field before you ship is really important. And I want to touch on something that Natalie mentioned, where the field is particularly important, and it is our job to go talk to customers as well, and we certainly do that, is in helping you understand how the customer will judge success. Because ultimately, and Neil touched on this, it is about outcomes. Customers hire you to deliver outcomes. And there are a lot of products, and I've been guilty of this in the past early in my career, we may be delivering on that outcome for the customer, but we're not giving them a way to validate that we actually help them do it. And so you won't actually get credit for that, because one of the things that you will learn, certainly in product, and I learned this early in my sales career, the average person does not like to think in an abstract manner. They will not spend time connecting the dots between the outcome they received and your product unless you help them make that connection. So where go-to-market partners are particularly helpful is helping us think about the go-to-market of the product when we're building the product. So is there a metric that we need to be able to surface for them so that when we go and we demo this product and we're talking about the outcome that we're going to deliver for them, they have a way to validate it and they can see, so to speak, that, that we've delivered the whole instead of selling the drill. Natalie, I know you had some thoughts there as well.
Yeah, I think you touched on a little bit where I was going with it. And I think especially as your organization grows and you have a larger sales organization, a larger CS organization, at least what I specifically have done that I think has worked is ensuring that you're kind of curating the feedback to product, because I think when you're in the early stages, right, you get into this where CS and sales is daily funneling, right? I just got off the call with a client, or I just got off a pitch and this is what they said, and this is what they want. And I think it can have a tendency to throw product into a bit of a spin, right? Which is like, where's really the priority? And I think as you grow, that's where, as senior product leaders, CEOs, CROs, I think that's where you really need to be able to go, okay, who are the people on my sales team and who are the people on my CS team that most deeply understand the customer's pain points, most deeply understand how our product serves the customer pain points, and is kind of most aligned with the overall company goals. And let's pull those people in for monthly or quarterly meetings with product, because those are really going to be the people that are going to have the lens of the wider customer base, as opposed to somebody who might be giving you a one-off random request from a customer that isn't really going to be scalable.
Yeah, that's 100% right, because one of the things you always want to avoid from a product standpoint is recency bias, and it is extremely easy to do that. You need to take a very systematic approach to the way that you evaluate the needs of the customer. And so getting that level of feedback where they're curating, I mean, one of the things that we like to do is we will pull in feedback from numerous sources. We'll look at analytics, we will look at conversations, we'll look at third-party win-loss reports, we will take requests from the customers, and we'll take requests from the field. And then we kind of aggregate all of that information. But what's always very, very helpful is exactly what you just described, which is within different departments, how would they rank the top 5? Because that gives us another layer of signal to understand where the needs are.
Excellent. I'd love to take a break. I think we're dipping our toes into maybe building out the roadmap, but I'd love to take a moment and just talk about metrics and how do we drive measurement and accountability through this alignment between the product and go-to-market teams. And so Neil, I'll bring it over to you. What strategies have you found effective in measuring the success of product initiatives in terms of their impact on revenue goals?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think one thing that's really helpful is just selecting metrics that rely on like team collaboration, but like baked in. And I think, as we all know, like Natalie and team have a quota to hit every quarter, like Frank and team have product goals. Like everyone has their individualized departmental metrics that they're going towards. But I think when possible, and when you have the agency to do it, if you can set up these metrics that rely on teams to work together, I think it really puts the fundamentals in place. So for example, like we were a YC company, we went through this YC Series A, Series B program that they have, and they shared that the most successful YC companies excel in 4 metrics. So one of them is percent of ARR that comes from organic leads. In other words, like how much word of mouth are you generating? Number 2, how many days is your sales cycle? Number 3, how many days for customers to see value? And number 4, what is your gross dollar retention? So these are key metrics that broadly measure the success of your company, product market fit, all those great things. And they're not reliant on any single department. The team has to work together to build a great customer experience for that all to work. And so I think for us, we really prioritize those metrics across the board so that you can put in place those structures to measure them at a monthly level, measure the entire team on them. And I think that really helps get the team in a position where they realize that it's a team sport and not an individual one.
Absolutely. Team sport. I love that. And it's always helpful to have those aligned metrics. Is there any time you've done like a very specific metric around a product initiative, or have you been staying more on those like company-wide metrics?
For certain upsell features, we have been able to tie that back to a product. It's like, hey, this new product add-on is driving this amount of incremental ARR. We find it more challenging to do on an individual, like, hey, this feature increased win rate by 5%. Like we had challenges like directly mapping that, but more so on the upsell side. Maybe Frank and team had more success there.
Yeah, happy to jump in. I would completely agree with you, Neil. It is often really difficult to tie one specific feature because we know a couple of things are true. And we look at win rates. Like I want to know our win rates every quarter against the core set of people that we compete with. And I want to understand both from feedback from wins and losses, as well as our field team, like why are we doing well? Where are we winning? Where are we losing? But it is often very difficult to tie it to one specific feature. Where we do have some success is if you're tying it to unlocking TAM. So for instance, perhaps we have to add language support for a given geography. In that case, we can typically say, okay, we were able to unlock this amount of pipeline because you can use the product in France now, and you couldn't do that before. But yeah, usually at the feature level, it can be a bit of a challenge.
It's funny. I'll say from my experience being on owning the revenue side of the house, my experience has typically been working with product teams is that we have to come up with a very specific KPI around either revenue or customer growth in order to justify, right? Because there's an opportunity cost to everything. And so if you're going to sit down with product and say, hey, we need this, right? Then there's something that they're not going to do. And so it's funny because I'll say that that's been the environment that I'm used to being in, where you do have to say, okay, you know what? We expect that ACV is going to increase by 15% if we're able to add this. And the way that we're going to do this is that we're going to, put it in a tiered package at this price point, and then you work with finance to back into how many of those then do you need to sell in order to hit that percentage of growth, right? And then, you come up with all the functions around it, which is, okay, we're going to have contests or spiffs or whatever you do, right, to get the team to do that. I also worked in a marketplace business where we sold things on a per lead basis. And so then it was a little bit easier, right? Because you were able to say, okay, we want to do this product improvement and we expect that it's going to drive more leads to our paying customers. And then that's going to yield X percentage of revenue increase. So I think part of it too is depending on the business you're in, sometimes it's a lot easier, I think, to put the KPIs in place than it is others.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. And I think the other thing that is helpful to know too, if you are in revenue, one of the ways to build a great partnership with your product person is don't just talk to them about the gaps, help them understand why you're winning. Because there are times the best investment I can make for the company is to double down in an area because it's doing really well for us in the market. But often when people will come to product, it's because we don't have something. And yet, one of the ways I can often help you the most is doubling down if we're really differentiating successfully in a given area and extending out that lead. So that's just advice I would give to anyone when they're trying to partner with product. Don't assume that they are operating with as much visibility as you are on the sales conversation. Now, the other piece that's worth noting is the customer that you sell to and the customer that uses the product are actually functionally different people. And so the things that they're going to ask for will in fact be different once they've got the experience with the product. So just understand that if you see a dichotomy sometimes on the roadmap between some of the things that you hear when you're selling and then what we're building, that's exactly where that comes from.
That's such a great takeaway. I also think it just in general, we don't celebrate the wins enough. So being able to go and pat the product team on the back. Thank you. This just, helped us win a deal. Awesome. So I think we've talked about alignment within teams. We talked about measurement. Now I want to bring it together to building that roadmap. So Frank, I'll start with you again. When you think about putting together a product roadmap, tailored to support revenue generation, but you're also thinking about incorporating the insights. I know we've touched on this a little bit today, but like talk about that creation of the product roadmap and how do you make sure it's as comprehensive as it should be?
Yeah, it is. We've had to dial it in every year. So I would tell you we get better year after year at this. It starts with what are the company objectives? So what are we trying to do? Is there a geography we're trying to unlock? Is there a segment of the market that we want to win because we think that's the right set of customers to go win? And once we understand that and we're aligned on that as a group, so at a senior leadership level, then it's our job to say, okay, which set of customer problems, if we target those, do we think will help us meet this objective? And then we, of course, want to go back to our partners in revenue to say, hey, if we do these things, does this make sense to you? Is this aligning with what you're hearing in the field? And then teams will go back and we will look at our capacity to be able to take on those kind of net new ads and then put a roadmap together and work with the team. It's multifaceted because it needs to be about what is the market, not just today, but what we want to see it look like in the future and what do we believe that we can influence. Because typically, if you're in a software business, with rare exceptions, your job is to differentiate, like it is in market that is based on differentiation versus kind of like a cost leadership type position, which means we really have to be aligned as a business on where we're going to differentiate and where we are not. Because it doesn't matter who you are, and we serve some of the largest companies in the world. And I will tell you, if I talk to my counterparts there, they will all tell you they're resource constrained. So we have to all be aligned on where we're going to make the bets, how we're going to differentiate, and what we expect the impact to be.
And Natalie, interested from your perspective, that like coming to the table with product and that negotiation, let's say, of looking at a roadmap, like how have you been effective in those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's a matter of, first of all, this goes a little bit back to Neil's point, which is I think having a very clear objective for the company that all of the executives in the company are aligned on that being the objective, right? And so I think when you start from that lens, it is a really good way to run those conversations, right? Which is you can sit down and have the conversation with product of like, okay, here's what our company objectives are. And then these are the things that I think I need on the revenue side of the house. How does that contradict with what you're trying to do, right? Either contradict or is adding beyond maybe your resources are, right? And then that's where you have to prioritize. And so I think for me, one of the, I think, more creative ways that I've handled it, and this would be something that I would urge any revenue leader to explore if it's an option for their company, is that when I've run up against resource constraints where there are things that I really want to get done to grow revenue, whether it's by customer base or ACV, it doesn't matter, just want to grow revenue, and product for whatever reason has an initiative that can't support the things that at least we think are a good idea. Identifying partners where you can white label and essentially have very low impact on the product and engineering org. It's still a lift, but it's a low lift. Identifying those areas where you can build third-party partnerships and white label the products you want them to build. It's something I've really successfully deployed in companies before, and it's something that, as long as it aligns with your company objective, I strongly urge revenue leaders to explore those paths.
Great. And Neil, just from your, again, that CEO lens, like one thing I always hear being in revenue operations is just a desire to see the roadmap and see it more and have the roadmap almost be a part of our company vision and like where we're going, right? How do you bring your product roadmap out to the company?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, like so many prospects asked for like the 6-month, 9-month roadmap. And I was like, I wish we had it too. But no, I think across the board, the way that we've tried to iterate on it is similar to how Frank and team do it on a quarterly level, specified like we can identify what's coming for the next quarter, can make promises beyond that, but to really segment it out. So the way that we do it is we have 4 to 6 what we call large product bets. These are larger scope projects that maybe align with a company strategy or otherwise fit within company goals. And then we have 10 to 15 areas of improvement. And I think echoing back to the team that there is maintenance to all the new features that are built really helps with this. These are typically add-ons to existing features. Not everything can just be developed and and suddenly just exist always. And lastly, 3 to 6 areas of tech debt and tech wealth. So just always building in those areas tends to be helpful. And we run this doc by our key go-to-market team members 3 weeks in advance. So we have this like active Notion doc. We have a lot of feedback on it. It's like, hey, CS leader, like, is this really a priority? Can you help understand the underlying ask here? And really just get the entire team bought in. So when the product team does have that meeting where they decide on those key areas, they have all the input from the team. And it's really like an initiative that the entire team is bought in on versus the product team saying, this is what we're going to build.
I'll have to say, I've never heard tech wealth as a term. Do you mind defining that in comparison to tech debt?
Yeah. Our CTO coined it as a way to help engineers get more excited about tech debt projects.
I love it. That's awesome. Great. Okay, so we've got our teams aligned. We have measurements. We have a roadmap, but everything is always changing, right? As they say, the only constant. And so we talked a little bit about this earlier, but just really wanted people's thoughts on how do you evolve to the demands of the market? How do you think about this prioritization, or when you actually might shift something dramatically in a roadmap? So Natalie, starting with you, how is your collaboration with your product teams to ensure that customer feedback and market trends are being pulled into the product development process?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I, so far today, have been on 3 calls around exactly this thing. So I would say it's something that I do have some experience in. I think the best way, at least for me to do it, is I think going back to what we talked about before, which is kind of ensuring that you're curating feedback so that the product team can really be focused, I think is a big part of it. I think then ensuring that you really are properly project managing the things that are happening. And I say this because you have product who is project managing product delivery, right? And then you have marketing that is project managing their delivery, which is, maybe it's a press release, maybe it's an email template, a JPEG, a slide, whatever it is. But I think where I have seen the biggest disconnect in every company that I've worked for is that there is no project management on the sales and CS side of the house, which is once marketing is done with it, then what happens? And so I think for me, what I've found is the best way to collaborate is, first of all, you make sure that you're delivering feedback from the customer. You do that through your account executives and your CS people who are most closely connected, right? Then once you agree upon the roadmap, I think that's where you really have to make sure that you are project managing the rollout to the sales team, which is they don't find out about this on a company all hands. They don't find out about this on a corporate comms email. They don't find out about this in a Slack channel. You treat this the way you would any rollout, which is you have a dedicated meeting with your sales and your account management team. You roll out the product to them first. There might be some feedback, and I'm sure Frank's probably experienced this. There might be feedback you weren't expecting, right? That comes from sales and CS that's really helpful. So you roll it out to them first. And then same with all the marketing materials, you have somebody on your team in sales enablement, sales training, that is essentially ensuring that they have the talk track, they understand why this is a win for customers, they understand how to sell it, how to talk about it, they have their social media posts ready, their email templates ready, their talk tracks ready. And so then it's because it's that final piece where it feels like it always breaks. And so if you have that project management side on the sales and CS side of the house, that's where I think you really hit a home run in the collaboration.
Frank, anything to add to that?
There we go. No, I think that's very good. The pieces that I think are really important to add is this: if your market is fast moving, what's, believe it or not, less important to the average customer is sending your product person out to talk about the next 6 months worth of features. What is really important is that you're sharing whatever your company's point of view is with them, because at the end of the day, what they're investing in is not just what they're buying today. They're investing in your capability to continue to deliver against problems and challenges that they care about. So if they buy that you understand the market in a way that would indicate that you are going to continue to lead the market and to deliver a solution that will be ahead of the challenges and issues that they run into, you're going to be really successful. So that doesn't mean you won't have like a roadmap slide that you might show to a customer. I would typically advocate never more than 6 months out that you show them. And if you're going to do that, even then, I would keep it to major deliveries only where you have high confidence that you're going to do those things. But the biggest thing to get across to the market is here's our point of view, right? And so when I want our sellers talking to our customers about our point of view, I want them to land a couple of things. We're going to invest in key outcomes that you care about. We're going to make sure that you create more meetings, that you create more opportunities, that your stage to stage progression rate goes up, your sales cycle time goes down, and your close rate goes up. And here are the things that we plan to do to deliver on that. If we can get that message across, the individual features matter far less than just helping them understand that, like, hey, we're laser focused on the things that you care about. So that's where that partnership really matters. Where I see it break down is if it becomes feature discussion, they're usually going to forget, unless it's something that is really, really important to them individually. They'll never remember most of the features I talk about on a roadmap call. What they need to walk away with is this company understands our business and they understand the outcomes that we care about, and they're investing in a way that would align with what we need.
That's so interesting. And I think that thought leadership is becoming so much more important and has always been important, but being able to have it on all of your channels and all of your teams. To Frank or Natalie, any recommendation of where that thought leadership develops in the organization? Is it your product marketing team? Is it product? Is it sales? Like, where do you recommend that comes from?
Yeah, I can
Frank,
start.
I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from the team. I think it has to be a collaboration because you're all going to see different aspects of the customer. So when I go talk to a customer, I may be there because there's a specific topic they want to talk about at that point in time. That topic, believe it or not, may not be one of their top 3 issues. It just may be the thing that they want to talk to me about right there. Natalie may have an entirely different conversation with them. Neil, because he's the CEO, may be talking about an entirely different set of topics. So it's got to be a collaboration because we need to aggregate all of that insight to then come back with, hey, this is really where we think the market is going. This is what we're experiencing. And as a result, this is the company point of view on this.
I would say,
Awesome.
Frank, I agree with you 100%. Because I know I specifically work in real estate technology. It's been what I've spent my career in. So I'm usually the domain expert, right, in most companies that I work for. But that certainly doesn't mean that I should be the one driving thought leadership, right? Because you have the CEO of the company who has a very clear vision when they founded the company of the pain points they were solving for. And then you have a product team that is deeply involved in executing on the vision of the company. So I would say, Frank, I agree with you 100%. It needs to be collaborative.
And Neil, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think that collaborative nature makes a lot of sense. And I think honestly, the hardest part that we've seen in this whole area is not just like saying yes to certain areas, but also just saying no. I think there's always a temptation to say like, yes, we can be the all-in-one platform. But as we know, it's so easy to just say yes and then end up with a half-baked product that actually does nothing and does not meet the customer's needs. So I think just speaking from personal experience, like in our market, there's a lot of different segments. It's very technically complex. So we've really had to make an intentional effort to scope in what we're doing, become best of breed, and just share with the team that like we're going to say no to some features, but it's in the interest of becoming number one and the best in this area. And that's been a challenge that we've worked through over time.
And that's such a great point too, because and that's why it has to be a cross-functional collaboration. Because if the product team is going to do that, then the revenue team has to be aligned with those choices. And it really starts with the CEO. And if everyone's aligned and they've said, hey, this is the customer set we really want to serve, we want to win, and we want to win a disproportionate number of those customers versus the competition. But to do that, we're going to also say no to this other set of customers. That helps everyone else get aligned because the marketing is focused on generating opportunities with the right set of customers. The product team is trying to back that up, and it sets up sales for success.
one question for the group, and I think there's a concept of tiering certain product launches. So you've got your big main stage. This might be at your user conference. This is what everyone's been hypothetically asking for, down to those, like we've talked about, those small feature requests. Does anyone have like kind of advice for the audience on like how to think about tiering and the associated like activities and communication plans around them? Maybe Neil, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the way that we've seen success with that too is just by putting in place the structures so that the sales team, CS team, and others just absorbs this content almost by default again. So we have weekly team meeting presentations where we cover those new features. We have assigned a dedicated lead on each team that's responsible and charged with understanding the latest product updates and communicating to them at their weekly team meetings. So now there really isn't any excuse, like, yes, you may miss the Friday meeting, but like you're there on the weekly sales meeting, so like you should know what's coming up there. So I think as much as possible, like filtering down that ownership so that someone is responsible for that. And then broadly too, like the other challenge that we've faced is just around like the quantity. Like we're moving really fast and it's hard to keep up. So I think understanding like what are those like need to know features versus like, yes, it'd be great if you know how SIM provisioning worked, but like that's not essential. So really helping like this individual, point of context, help distill it for them has been helpful too.
So Natalie.
I think I'll share, this is all obviously contingent upon resourcing, right? You could actually do this, but I know I've always in the past followed this rule of if you can have a quarterly launch that is something that is a big announcement, right? It's, marketing puts out a press release, everybody's posting on social media, like you have a whole kind of company effort around this quarterly release. And then you have these features that are every month, right? Which is something for the sales and CS team to just talk about, right? Which is, hey, we did this little thing, whatever it may be, and here's why it's really exciting. I've always tried to anchor to something small every month and something big every quarter. In certain companies, it might be something big every 6 months. But I think trying to anchor on something like that is how you also get alignment with product, sales, marketing, because you're on a schedule.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it comes down to two things, really. What is the business need, and what can your customers absorb? So, as our customer base has gotten larger, and in particular with some of the enterprise customers, we've gone from 4 launches to 3 because we have a very productive product team, and that is awesome. But for some of the larger customers, it's just hard for them to go and enable and to train. And so giving them advanced notice is super important. And so, yeah, I agree. Like monthly launches for us, they're typically smaller releases. There's less workflow change for the customer. And then the bigger ones, we have a lot more alignment, a lot more lead time for the customer. And that's super important. And then just making sure you've got partnership with enablement and, product marketing, if you're fortunate to have that, to make sure that your internal teams are enabled.
That's great. Yeah, so interesting to change your launch cycle to the market and to your customer base.
Yeah.
Well, I can't believe time flew by. And I just wanted to go around the room and hear from folks on like what their biggest takeaway was from the conversation. So Natalie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think my first takeaway is, I think, as I said before, my whole career I've been in real estate technology. And so my first takeaway is it is very mentally stimulating and energizing to spend time with really brilliant leaders outside of my specific domain and that are more just straight technology companies. So first of all, I want to say thank you because this has been really energizing. It's funny, this is like such a tactical thing, but Neil, I wrote this down because percentage of ARR from organic leads, I don't know if that's something that I should have known, but honestly, that was something that I've never actually measured that before. So I want to say thank you for that. And Frank, your perspective from a product standpoint has been incredibly helpful. So much appreciated.
So Neil.
Awesome. Yeah, that was some really great conversations today. I think the biggest like takeaway that I've had, just like speaking to the viewers here that are maybe looking to implement some of these changes and or like refine the product go-to-market communication, is just think about structures. Like for us, the biggest thing that was a game changer wasn't like any one thing. It was like, what do you do by default so that market feedback can be shared with product? And just building in that on a regular or recurring basis is really helpful for us personally. And I think it could be helpful for a lot of folks listening too.
So, Frank.
Yeah, this has been great. And I think that my biggest takeaway from this is just, again, alignment. It is so important to be aligned across every function in the business and to make sure that whenever you are putting roadmap together, that everyone has had a chance to weigh in, they're bought in. If we make trade-offs, that we're making them together. That is the most important thing that you can do, because at the end of the day, product that does not drive value for the customer and the business is really useless. And so you have to make sure that that team is aligned before you start.
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed just kind of thinking about how go-to-market can be this like force multiplier to the product teams, right? You can help connect the dots with the customer needs and where they're having the successes, especially, right, as well as their pain points. But I don't often, especially being on the revenue side, think enough about like what we can do for product. And I know they're always incredibly busy organization, but being able to bring those like bite-sized pieces of information and context just goes so far. And yeah, great conversations on how to think about, we're also rolling out these changes and roadmaps in the way that makes sense both for your customer base, but for your internal company at whatever stage you're at. So thank you all. This is an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed learning from you all. And I wish the audience best of luck on their revenue renaissance as the conference continues.